So I've activated the recording. The other thing too is we're using closed captioning. So I'm there we go. So I've enabled closed captioning. And if you want to hide the subtitles, you just have to click on more and hide subtitles. I'm going to put this in the chat as well. And you can turn them back on at any time by clicking on more once again and clicking show subtitles. So I'm going to put this in the chat and I will repeat it another time. Those are the two things that I wanted to share before we hand it over to our 4 presenters. So thank you so much for joining us this morning and welcome.
Thank you, Corey, for chairing this. And I just wanted to let you know we're doing kind of like a performance art, or trying to, over Zoom. And if you have the opportunity to put your view up at the top right corner to speaker view, you might get a better experience of what we're trying to do. So here we go. We're going to start. I celebrate teaching that enables transgressions, a movement against and beyond boundaries. It is that movement which makes education a practice of freedom. Bell Hooks, Teaching to Transgress, 1994.
We need to develop radical pedagogy. This is about strategy. This is about getting the work done.
The aim is to reframe issues through experience. Identity is an important part of us. But when you're speaking to experience through emotion, you're putting everyone on the same plane. Paromitavora.
Art invites us to think rather than telling us what to think. This is one of its great powers. And if you make your art accessible and beautiful enough, people will want to follow where it goes. And because they themselves are deciding where to go with it, they'll more easily connect it to their own experience. What if the classroom worked like a nonviolent movement?
What if educators assumed resistance from students and worked to engage from an emotional place to encourage openness to new perspectives?
What if the class took a multidisciplinary approach, embracing theoretical, creative, and research-based perspectives and practices?
What if students were invited to be the expert, asked to be storytellers, artists, or activists?
What if vulnerability and surprise were embraced, acknowledged, and studied?
What if students made educated choices about which forces to resist?
This is what nonviolent movements do. Is this what classrooms can do too?
So now we're going to play a rap that was made by a student this past session. His name is Caden. He's given us permission to do this here today. I'd like you to listen to it, and I'll introduce our presentation a little bit more and his effort in our class.
So sick of all this POC. I don't understand why they just can't see me for me. I know brothers who had it way worse than me, but we stand together when racism is all we ever see. Some of us just trying to find some peace, but others had enough, so they picking up the piece. Now they take it to the streets, they don't wanna hear us speak. So just let me tell my story, you can see just what I see. Now wait first, let me say, I don't gotta be religious if I got a certain name, but I'm proud of my name and I know from where it came. But I still been hated for it, and that hate just bring me pain. I was 7 years old when I was chilling on the beach in Florida. Got caught a terrorist and a foreigner. They was wishing me dead. Somebody called the coroner. They kept slurring at me without a warrant. I didn't get it. I was 7, saying go to hell, cause I ain't wanted in heaven. I ain't never did nothing, they don't know where I'm from, but they assume based on the views that they were regulated. Now listen, on to the next. I was 14 when I got put under arrest. I was late for the bus, so I ran across the street. A cop told me to stop, so I didn't move my feet. He asked for ID, I didn't have it. He asked me for my name, I told him, he started laughing. He said, let me check the system, and he started to type. I wonder what this have happened if I was a little more white. Yeah, now let's move on. I've been all around the world, but the biases in some places just stay strong. So I don't stay long, cause in the airport they often check me twice, and I just try and stay calm. Yeah, put me in a separate line. They check me twice, they about to do it third time. I used to ask why, so I guess I never learned. Now I look in the line, it's all Middle Easterns, and I guess I fit the description. My last name Muhammad, so I guess that's where I fit in. No violence was the reason, I swear my hockey bleeding. I'm so fucking sick and tired of shit, I'm on my knees, God, I'm pleading. Yeah, what to do? I got like 10 more stories I could go and tell you, but I'm sitting here asking like, God, what's the point? I done been through so much, all I got is my voice. Now I don't know what to do. I keep trying to stand tall, but I might be through. But no matter what happens, I'ma get up. This shit just never ends, I swear I'm fucking fed up. I'm so sick of all this POC. I don't understand why they just can't see me for me. I know brothers who had it way worse than me, but we stand together when racism is all we ever see. Some of us just trying to find some peace, but others had enough, so they picking up the piece. Now they take it to the streets, they don't wanna hear us speak. So just let me tell my story, you can see just what I see,
The incredible music you just heard was written and recorded by Dawson student and Resist Violence alumni, Caden Cesar Mohammed. We'd like to thank him for allowing us to present his work alongside our presentation today. And thank you all for attending our symposium. Thanks to Saltese as well for hosting us. We are attempting to make this interesting and creative by sharing multiple voices and stories that motivate a group of teachers and students in the Resist Violence community of practice at Dawson College in Montreal. Although the whole group could not be here, myself, Kim Simard, co-founder of the pedagogy and communications teacher, and Pat Romano, the other co-founder and humanities teacher, as well as Sue Elmsley, English teacher and published poet, and Annick Legault, a psychology teacher and researcher. We'll share our voices about a pedagogical approach to addressing complex social issues we strongly believe in. At the end of our presentation, I will briefly introduce the Resist Violence website, and we will use breakout rooms to initiate workshops we've prepared. At this moment, we would like to share with you a recounting of the tragic shooting that took place at Dawson College in 2006, and a teacher's commitment to herself and her students after it happened.
My experiences that semester have had a big impact on my teaching, shaped my commitment to this pedagogy, to finding ways, effective ways, to find connections across the myriad of us's and them's we all build, and engage my students in actively resisting the ideas that justify violence against others. But I also learned one very particular lesson. The semester was difficult. So many of us had students who had been injured, or knew someone who had been shot, or were friends with Anastasia D'Souza, the young woman just beginning her college studies who had been killed, or with James Santos, the young man who had spoken with the gunman, begging him not to shoot her a second time, saying, "You don't need to be doing this. There are other ways. I can help you." Everyone was on edge. Any sudden loud noise made people jump. Rumors flew, including one about a black trench coat left outside the college with a note saying, "Dawson, it's not over." In this context, I was teaching a course on the issues of war and peace. It was going well. Students expressed that they were glad I was not avoiding the topic of the shooting. But a few weeks later, when I began to speak about how a person can become capable of taking another human life, how militaries turn recruits into soldiers ready for battle, my usually engaged students went silent. I vividly remember the moment. I looked at them, like deer in the headlights, I thought, and I felt so irresponsible. So foolish. How could I have gone this far? After class, I hurried to talk to one of the trauma counselors we had on campus. His words have remained with me since. Yes, one of your students might be triggered by the material in the classroom, but if they are, then they would be triggered at some point. There are potential triggers everywhere, and if it happens while in school, there is support for them. And your class, what you are teaching, is so very, very important. You are helping your students to understand what happened, and understanding makes healing possible. Don't stop.
Triggers everywhere. As I was lecturing in a developmental psychology course on corporal punishment, I spoke of the concept of habituation, getting used to stimuli in the environment, and how it can escalate the force needed to punish a child. I had in mind a slap on a child's hand for touching something they're not supposed to, and getting harsher next time, but I didn't mention it to the class. A student of mine spontaneously said with his heart on his sleeve, "Miss, I never got used to being beaten in the shower by my mother, never." My heart sank. I knew then I had made a mistake of acting detached, maybe even callous. I apologized and talked to the whole class, but directly to him. "I'm so sorry for what happened to you. I do not wish to diminish your experience. You're right in saying that we do not get used to being abused."
Silence, anger, disengagement, denial, each a common psychological process that can be activated automatically when we are faced with something that challenges our existing ideas and values.
Cognitive dissonance. This happens to all of us. We either hold two conflicting attitudes, or we're confronted with our behavior contradicting with our attitude. This situation creates extreme discomfort. Since discomfort is so unpleasant, we, all of us, are motivated to do anything to reduce it. We either change our behavior, change one of our cognitions, or add consonant cognition. We will go to extreme lengths to reduce the discomfort. Denial, distortion, justification. Aronson, 1998, 2007. More modern research using functional magnetic resonance imagery technology allowed researchers to locate what parts of the brain are activated when we are in a state of cognitive dissonance. The striatum and other highly specific areas with the prefrontal cortex are either activated or shut down. Basically, when we are in a situation of dissonance, the areas responsible for planning, reasoning, decision-making are turned off, while the emotion circuit is shining bright with consonance is restored. So this means we cannot think rationally when we are in denial or trying to justify our attitudes and behaviors while facing dissonance.
In states of denial, sociologist Stanley Cohen emphasizes the ordinariness of denial, arguing that the interesting question is not why do we shut out, but why do we ever not shut out? Cohen explores the human tendency to deny more fully in describing some of the different forms denial can take. For example, in regards to what exactly is being denied, this could imply the facts themselves, as in climate change isn't happening. The full significance of what happened, as in it wasn't rape. Or a dismissal or minimization of the psychological, political, or moral implications that should follow, as in this all happened in the past, let's just move on. The very persistence of denial reveals the difficulties of creating a classroom environment where students open up to new ideas, particularly when they connect to systems of privilege and disadvantage. In such a case, how productive is it to tell them they are wrong by repeating one more time the facts? Stop me, oh, stop me. Stop me if you think that you've heard this one before.
A teacher wants to bring up a social issue that has a multitude of complexities and censors themselves for fear that conflict will erupt. Or a past experience of a student hijacking the class about racism with harmful all lives matter rhetoric makes a topic taboo in the teacher's repertoire. A teacher is evaluated as being too political, controversial, and moves their practice and research away from a topic they are passionate about.
I was a young teacher going over the impact media has on culture in the context of an intro-level communications class. As we started a brief discussion to encourage participation, we talked about sports and the ads that reinforce or enforce, in some cases, unrealistic concepts of masculinity. All was seemingly going well. Students were interested and provoked in the way I had anticipated. Then I explicitly made the link to these kinds of messages and rape culture. A very disturbed young man in the back blurted out, "There's no such thing as rape culture, come on." The class went silent, and with time running out, I tried to wrap up the conversation by asking why this was something he felt strongly about. He responded by leaving the room. For the week that followed, I tried to find every piece of media that could prove how real rape culture was. There was the YouTube video gone viral at the time, with the Halifax Frosh Week group chanting, "No means yes, yes means anal." One of many examples, I was prepared to show the class to prove something that I assumed most had already accepted. But he didn't show. I don't know what happened. He dropped, he switched, I'm not sure. His fragility struck me, though, and his extreme reaction made me scared. So I started censoring myself in class, skating around terms I thought might be too offensive. I tried to find ways to justify this approach, even though it was truly not one that suited me and was not particularly effective either. And then events in the college community and beyond kept prodding at me as though to defy me and to keep squelching my voice and my commitment to engagement in the classroom with the issues that affect us all. I learned a colleague had made the wrong move with a student when a student tried to make a sexual harassment claim. "You're a very attractive young lady," he said. "Thought you'd be used to those kinds of advances." And then there was this. And then there was an ad that looked like this on the metro that I saw. And so I decided I had to bring it up again. So I tried a different strategy and I showed them this.
Oh my God, is this image really presented in class right now?
Yes, I know about this campaign. Are we gonna study this?
Panties.
Not more about consent. We did the stupid workshop. Why can't we just get over it?
This is so thong.
In our community of practice, we discussed ways to frame violence to promote psychological safety for all, such as by providing a wider historical and cultural perspective, whether in terms of pulling apart the language to reveal how the meaning of words change in time, place, and culture, or by looking at the deep historical roots of systems that continue to privilege some at the expense of others. We explored the value of drawing out interconnections between different forms of violence, shifting from the personal to safer academic discussions and vice versa, and using art and storytelling to bring in the element of surprise so that students' preconceived assumptions are not already in place, filtering out material that is too threatening. While we explore the harm inflicted by structural and cultural forms of violence in a resist violence classroom, we never assume who is privileged in our classroom and recognize that those most resistant to social justice issues, typically white, heterosexual young men, are often themselves feeling overwhelmed by their insecurities, shaped by such experiences as early abuse, relentless bullying, or family poverty, and buttressed by harmful expectations about masculinity. Essentially, we asked ourselves whether, as Allison, a 3D animation teacher in our community of practice phrased it, would I become a more effective pedagogue if I made a greater effort to better understand why some students resist me? This is bringing everyone to what is perhaps most interesting, but also provocative about the resist violence pedagogy, specifically its foundation in the theory and practice of nonviolence. Nonviolent theorists call for us to maintain a distinction between an individual and their actions or ideas, acknowledge the possibility for all of us to change profoundly, and inspire us to see ourselves in the other. In other words, to look for the we rather than the us and them.
Finding these interconnections or keeping alive a shared common humanity in all situations proved to be more contentious than what we had anticipated. Can we really say that a we exists within a system of justice? Or does this move us into the dangerous plane where the power differentials, the privileges accrued by some, and the serious wrongs done to others are glossed over? At best, perhaps we should see those positioned differently within unequal systems as potential allies. But given the relationships of power enveloping them, the collaborations themselves remain inherently unstable. This doesn't seem a solid basis for suggesting the necessary existence of the we. Allison expressed her misgivings about being asked to find the we in a classroom.
She explained, "We is the one pronoun I ask students to avoid, unless they are working as a team. The I demands positionality, and the you is a call to engagement. We makes me suspicious. When I hear or see the word, I worry about the elision of multiple points of view, the oversimplification of an argument. But really, my distrust stems from experience encapsulated in an article called The Politics of We by Mariana Tregovnik, which argues the we as a rhetorical device either ignores or demonizes individuals or groups it excludes, while repressive politics of inclusion obliges members to deny parts of themselves."
This we, though, is really the divisive us, very far from the nonviolence ideal of a shared humanity. And as Allison's explorations went on, she eventually concluded,
"We cannot assume that any we pre-exists, that we are in agreement and working to the same end, or that a we that ignores internal differences can or should be protected. Yet collective action is essential to effect lasting change. To build a we from disparate parts is a challenging, painful, courageous, and perhaps unending process. Still, the only we's that attract me, or that I consider possible, are polyvocal, self-making, transformative, and transforming arrangements of diverse actors that respect, listen, challenge, and learn from one another. Those we's need to be cherished, nurtured, and open to expansion."
this idea brings us beautifully back to the nonviolent theorist view of the we. For those following the tradition of Gandhi and Martin Luther King, the we exists. It is richer than an alliance forged by common goals, but one is founded on a deep faith that broken relationships can be repaired, that reconciliation between enemies is possible. Of course, it takes work. It will never be realized unless prejudice, indifference, fear, and hatred are eliminated. But it is a vision that, if awakened, can inspire us to try.
I was teaching the poetic form known as the villanelle, a tightly structured 19-line poem with 2 repeating refrain lines. We had already considered the most famous examples, and were considering some contemporary examples in preparation for an upcoming test that students were to write in class. When I showed a villanelle called Larkspur by Rachel Rose and published in her collection Giving My Body to Science, things heated up in the class. The poem's speaker recounts to a woman named Ellen, who the poem is dedicated to, what happened when Ellen was moving into her first apartment in Brooklyn. Ellen was attacked by a stranger, nearly choked and sexually assaulted. The poem speaker says, the door was left ajar. He forced your legs apart. Ellen was left with finger marks on her throat. In our discussion of the dramatic situation of the poem, one student, a young woman, took issue when I said that Ellen was sexually assaulted. She put down her pen and spoke up. She was raped. Raped. She was raped, she said. Suddenly, this was a discussion about more than a poem. The tension in the room was palpable. Perched on the edge of a table at the front of the classroom, I could feel my adrenaline kick up. What was at stake here? Did the student perceive in my use of the term sexual assault an effort to deny the victim's experience or sanitize what happened to her? I was definitely being challenged and with a degree of hostility. I didn't know if I answered in the best way. I forgot to take a breath. I could feel my heart pounding and my brow was probably furrowed. I didn't disagree with the student. It is a poem about rape. But I first defended my use of the term sexual assault, giving recourse to the law. Canada has a broad definition of sexual assault. It includes all wanted sexual touching and activity, such as unwanted sexual grabbing, kissing, and fondling, as well as rape. Then I pointed to the poem. He forced her legs apart. We can surmise what happened, I said, but that's all the poem says overtly. I might have and should have invited this student or others to make her case, point to other evidence in the poem to support her assertion. She could have pointed out that the poem speaker says to Ellen, quote, the evidence was intact. Your family was called to the emergency ward, which suggests that Ellen might have undergone an evidentiary exam or rape kit. I sensed that approaching the poem sort of clinically, treating it analytically by focusing on evidence, might have been construed as a challenge to the victim. I feared giving this impression. Not sure if I was capable in the moment of saying that this is precisely one of the things that Rachel Rose highlights in her poem. The problematic way that sexual assault survivors are treated after a crime for which there are statistically very few convictions. And how despite collective efforts to deny or erase the trauma, it recurs for the survivor, like the refrain lines of the villanelle form itself. I tell students that the moments they snag on in a poem are the most significant. As Robert Frost said, the poem is nicked for meaning there. But it was near the end of the class and we stopped before resolving our discussion. Though part of me wished we could return to it the next class, that was the day of the test. And going back to it after that, I felt would be awkward. We couldn't, I told myself. Did I lose an opportunity to discuss what was really at stake in the students' resistance to my characterization of what happened? This was before the Me Too movement, but we could feel, all of us, the rising tide. Did I settle on a legalistic defense? Reading poems is about considering the evidence in the poem, I thought. But how did the woman who asked the question and how did everyone else in the class feel about our exchange?
Well, we are all a work in progress.
In reconceptualizing complicity in the social justice classroom, Michelangelo Zimbalist argues that we need to stop treating complicity as a problem to be solved and start treating it as a fact of our civic life and learn to live with. He adds, this implies, for instance, that rather than structuring our lives in ways that force on avoiding complicity altogether, we should recognize that this is an inevitable aspect of political life, and we are all already complicit in all kinds of ways to unjust acts.
Megan Bowler agrees, noting that education is not effective if it is combative and alienating, adding that as if educators, we shatter someone's familiar and comfortable worldview. In compassion, we need to replace the vacuum with something else. She goes further, suggesting that we need to offer our students a sense of critical hope. She quotes one of her angry, defensive white male students who told her at the end of the semester that he wished she had told the class that all these screwed up things in the world could possibly change.
Zimbalist expresses it this way. If the issue is how to handle white students' denial of complicity, the pedagogical question at hand is not, what can I, as a teacher, do to reaffirm students' moral agency so that they admit their complicity, but rather, how can I, as a teacher, move my students to take action in their everyday lives, to refuse to being complicit in social harm.
On Facebook, a former student of mine posted in despair, "I can't take all of this bad news. I just want to crawl up into a ball and forget about the state of the world." And I replied, "Have you tried focusing on the resistance to all of these things?" Photography and artwork can evoke our emotions and self-reflection. They can document and present change, as well as usher in possible alternatives. A young man in my class had an idea for a project on objectification. It was a commentary on the over-sexualization and commodification of women in rap music and culture. On the day of the pitch to the class, he waited until the very end to speak. He presented the idea of reappropriating album covers, replacing the revealing images of women with men to make a point. Then sheepishly he said, "I kind of feel bad presenting this idea because I'm white and I'm a guy, you know?" "What? No!" erupted a voice from the room. It was the voice of a Black female student. "It can't just be me. We all have to fight this together," she said.
All creative forms, especially those that speak to a collective, have the potential to inspire people to resist. Poet W.H. Auden famously wrote these lines, "For poetry makes nothing happen. It survives in the valley of its making, where executives would never want to tamper. Flows on south from ranches of isolation and the busy griefs, raw towns that we believe and die in. It survives, a way of happening, a mouth."
Since 1991, a poetry festival in Colombia has been transformative in a community that has been plagued by violence. In Medellin, Colombia, different forms of art such as murals, but especially poetry, has been a way of happening, a mouth to counter violence. In this article titled Medellin's Poem of Peace in The Guardian, Benjamin Ball writes about this surprise phenomenon. Medellin is the world capital of poetry. This is no small achievement. In 1991, Medellin, the capital of Colombia's mountainous coffee region, was the most violent city in the world, and a global center for drug trafficking. Festival organizer Fernando Rendon told me that it was founded in this context as a form of cultural resistance, a voice for peace and a protest against injustice and terrorism, including state terrorism. The festival is now the largest of its kind in the world. Over 8 days, 3 poetry recitals are held in public parks, university theaters, high security prisons, and schools and libraries in poor marginalized suburbs. To date, Medellin has hosted 820 poets from 142 countries and many indigenous nations. Colombia is still a volatile country, but Medellin is no longer a place where the majority live in fear.
People turn to art, even under horrific conditions, searching for ways to express their humanity, oppose the status quo, motivate others, and inspire hope for a better future. But of course, artistic forms of resistance are not sufficient in themselves to bring down systems of injustice. And in Colombia today, we are witnessing a resurgence in the population's anger over the unaddressed social and economic inequalities in society. Nonviolence has many tools in its toolkit. The value of storytelling and art is that it can open up new ways of thinking and being, creating the foundations for the groundwork of social change to take hold. And as such, it has immeasurable value for activists and educators.
Nonviolence theory and practice. Nonviolence is a strategy for social change. Nonviolence is a foundation for a pedagogy. The term nonviolence provokes many responses.
Nothing to think about here. I'm not violent.
What is there to talk about? Teaching is nonviolent.
I'm not advocating violence, but let's be realistic. Do you think that the powerful will just give up their privileges?
What is missing for many, perhaps most of us, is a real understanding of how transformative social change actually takes place, or much awareness really about the history of nonviolence. Susan Niemann's Learning from the Germans is an enlightening exploration of what peoples addressing the legacies of institutionalized systems of racism can learn from Germany's efforts to confront meaningfully their own. She examines the strengths but also weaknesses in Germany's approach, one being the failure to inspire the next generation with the possibilities for resistance, even to the Nazis. There are many monuments, street names, and school names across Germany to commemorate the Munich University students, Hans and Sophie Scholl, who were arrested and executed for printing and distributing anti-Nazi leaflets. These are in contrast, though, to the single monument that stands in a little park on a side street, usually empty, that remembers the bravery and triumph of hundreds of non-Jewish wives who protested in February 1943 in Berlin, right next to the SS headquarters, the arrest and soon-to-be deportation of their Jewish husbands. They came every night after work for more than a week. They were heedless to the Gestapo guns that were brought out to confront them. And though mostly forgotten by history, they prevailed. Their efforts led to the release of their husbands by a regime worried about inciting larger societal opposition. Their story for Germans, in contrast to the Scholls, is more threatening. It challenges the widely held narrative that resistance to the Nazis was doomed to fail. In fact, its memory perhaps raises some uncomfortable questions for all of us. But at the end of the day, it also inspires us to think of new possibilities. Nonviolence, so often devalued and dismissed, has a transformative power that few of us recognize. To reclaim its power, nonviolence must be understood as including actions that are simultaneously without violence and against violence. Its capacity to be forceful yet restrained, to oppose unjust systems while respecting individuals, to be disruptive and at the same time constructive, creates the unexpected, spaces where real change becomes possible. As nonviolent activist and theorist Ellen Vinfagen argues, these dualities are most visible in actions that are not only without and against violence, but also beyond violence. And that is where art and activism can so powerfully be combined and brought into the classroom.
Stephen Ducombe and Steve Lambert from the Center for Artistic Activism acknowledge that the term artistic activism seems like an oxymoron, but like most paradoxes, it contains a deeper and more incisive truth. At first glance, these aims seem at odds with one another. Activism moves the material world while art moves the heart, body, and soul. In fact, however, they are complementary. Social change doesn't just happen, it happens because people decide to make change. The ability of artistic activism to surprise us, to show up in unlikely places, for example, not a gallery, or take on unfamiliar forms, for example, not a protest march, creates an opportunity to bypass seemingly fixed political ideas and moral ideals and remap cognitive patterns. Surprise is a moment when hearts can be touched and mind reached and both changed.
Meanwhile, back in my classroom, in a class about media and rape culture, I showed this, as I mentioned earlier. And I asked a few questions. So students' reflections on this campaign and the use of artistic activism allowed for students to enter into a complex discussion about a difficult topic from a common starting point. Although everyone brought their own impressions, each person left with the understanding that this is a reaction to something profoundly biased in many cultures. They can research the campaign's motivations. They can discover the story of the defense attorney in Ireland using a woman's choice of panties as a justification for rape. They can research why so many sexual assaults are not reported. They can study the resistance to this thing we call rape culture without the conversation being polarized or hurtful. The unexpected has a way of puncturing our shells, if even for a short moment, and these surprises can lead to larger openings if they occur regularly. If all goes well, students might want to develop a campaign of their own and respond creatively to what is being learned. In some cases in my classroom, that has looked like this. Or like this.
Art can connect people. We know from a 2004 RAND study that, quote, the communicative nature of the arts, the personal nature of creative expression, and the trust associated with revealing one's creativity to others may make joint arts activities particularly conducive to forging social bonds and bridges across social divides. Using stories and art in the classroom offers safe spaces for silent contemplation and personal growth. Suddenly, a student who felt angry or powerless about a certain issue feels compelled to make work that will get people to think about it in a different way and possibly act towards a shared goal. There is strength in creating that thing, and even more in learning how to express one's truth in a space where others are taking the same risk. By engaging in this activity with our students, we explore agency, creativity, vision, and vulnerability as a team, admitting when things are not where we might want them to be.
This work, this shared vulnerability takes practice. It has to become a habit. The use of the word habit is significant here. Sarah Ahmed, who in Living a Feminist Life asks us to create more equal relationships with one another, describes whiteness as a habit. And habit links to the latest research in prejudice studies. 30 years ago, psychologist Patricia Devine first defended the idea that people could be unconsciously racist. Skeptical of significance of interventions that seek to directly change implicit or unintentional biases, as she refers to them now, Devine asks us to consider them an unwanted habit to be broken through a combination of motivation, awareness, effort. We think this strategy offers further insight into the power that resists violence pedagogy. As students' awareness of the suffering inflicted by violence in its many forms increases, they're also encouraged to pay attention to the violence that shapes their lives, reflect on the possibility of change, and actively begin to find creative ways to resist violence. They're potentially developing an everyday habit of resistance.
This is what nonviolent movements do. This is what classrooms can do too. That the present driving force of today's activism as young people reminds us of the necessity of making more room for this kind of experience regularly in the classroom. The beauty of studying and engaging in artistic activism is that no one has to be an expert, but everyone finds connections with one another by trying.
You have a poem to offer.
It is made of action.
You must search for it.
Run outside and give your life to it.
We'd like to thank you for experiencing this with us today. Here are the works that we cited. I'll leave that on the screen just for a little bit. And what we'd like to do, if you don't mind, is we'd like to do a few things. The first is we'd like to do a poll. And I see people are writing in the chat some things that we should look into. Thank you so much for being here. So we'll do a little poll if you don't mind, and then afterwards, what we'll do is we have the opportunity because we're doing a symposium, so we have a bit of time to do little workshops. So we'll give you the workshop blurbs, and then you can look at which ones you'd like to do, and then as you're contemplating that, we can look at the Resist Violence website, and I can go over that kind of stuff. Thank you so much. Julia, stay, there's more to come. So I think the poll is there. If anyone, if you can. Oh, good. Thank you, Eva. So I am just going to load up the website just to make sure it's there. Sorry, I talk to myself often. I don't know if that's a common thing now on Zoom,
Yeah.
particularly, but I like people to know what I'm working on too, because they can't see, you know?
Right. Signposts.
Yeah, exactly. All right. So as the poll is coming, I think most people have entered some information. Maybe, Corey, we could also put up the workshop blurbs for those who have done their poll.
Great.
Thank you so much.
I'll post it in the chat.
Yes, please.
Okay, here we go. Hold on. Wait. I'm going to do them in two installments because it's a lot of text. So the first one and the second one.
There we go. Thank you so much.
So I think there are just a couple of people who might be finishing the poll, but I can end it now if you'd like to see. We have 10 out of 12 people.
Okay, that's great. That seems like a good number, no? I assume.
Yes. All right, here we go. And I'm going to end it right now in case you're wrapping it up.
Great.
And share the results.
Thank you. How do we save these results? Can we?
Mm-hmm.
Do I just take a screen grab of it, or?
Oh yeah, that's. Yeah.
Sorry.
I'll take screenshots. I know they recorded as well, but just for, and I'll send it to you.
Okay, great. I appreciate that. So now we're opening up 2 breakout rooms. If you want to take your view off of speaker view and put it to gallery, we can all see each other. Hello, everyone. So we've got experiencing disconnection, which Pat and Nick will take on. And then we have creative connections, which Sue will take on, and I'll be there cheering her on. So what we'd like to do is for you to choose which one you'd like to go to, which will be fun. And at the same time, as you're looking at this and trying, I see this question, Christine, and it's making me think a lot. So I want to.
I also wrote something in the chat about it.
I think it's something we could maybe bring up, Sue, in your workshop.
Yes, and yeah. I mean, yes. We did a lot of work on that very question.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you come to that workshop, maybe that would be a good opportunity. So I just wanted to show you our website briefly, which will also bring us to the workshop as well. Christine's asking which one. Oh, you asked many questions. My apologies.
Yeah.
The one, your students respond to being graded on such a personal piece, like the one that I showed by Kaden or what have you. Yeah, we can address that in that workshop.
The workshop is the creative connections one.
Yeah. You want me to stop sharing just to free the screen, the poll?
Sure. Okay. All right. So so if you have a chance to head to our website, the website, I forgot to put it in the chat, my apologies, is resistviolence.com. I'll just copy and paste that. Hope that'll work. Let's see. No, it did not. For some reason, I have a Zoom link. So it's resist-violence.com. And we've created this website in order to kind of, I mean, in our blog, you see that we're kind of working out some of the ideas around this pedagogy. We kind of write about them, etc. Ideas around like what is too much to show in the classroom, what kind of feedback have we gotten, etc. We also have worked out like how do you bring in critique into a classroom where people are doing very personal work, which is something that Christine had brought up. So we mentioned that in this particular blog post. There are many there that maybe might be of use to you. We have kind of like a what's new, where you can kind of look at things, look at different things that have been happening. We had recently, so Caden's work that you heard earlier was part of a student virtual exhibit that is accessible on our website here. We have other student work too that's exhibited throughout the website. But today, I'd like to navigate to our Getting Started page. So we have this option to kind of go to the Getting Started page itself. There are different kind of resources that are there for you, etc. But when you go to Ideas for the Classroom, I'm going to click on that one to give a sense of what that is. So when you go to this particular menu item, there are a variety of different things that might be useful for you depending on what you're interested in addressing in the classroom. And we've got a variety of different links to go to. And we've also developed some class activities, etc., that you can click on, and those details will be available to you. For the workshop that Sue is doing called Creative Connections, I would encourage you to go onto the website and find a scaffolding poetry exercise. So when you click on that and you click on the assignment details, you should have a PDF that shows up. And that PDF, is something that we will use during the workshop. And you can download it here, depending on what your system is. Maybe it's already downloaded it, I don't know. But there's always a download option. And the attempt is for us to kind of make use of some of these things that we've put up there. So you're welcome to go on there and do that. So that being said, has everyone read through the descriptions for our little breakout room exercise or workshops? I don't know if you have. Maybe give a little thumbs up. I'm a fan of the thumbs up. And before I let you go from this website as well, there's a lot of interesting stuff too. We have modules. We have a module on demilitarization, othering, rape culture, and media violence, and each of these has a variety of different resources, but also ideas on like how would you start with something like that, right? Like a starting point, some goals. We always have a featured artist. In this case, we have Audre Lorde. And there are many kind of, if you connect to some of these, there are many resources that may be, great discoveries for you or useful for whatever topic you're bringing into the classroom. And that's the case. Every module kind of looks like that as well. So I hope I gave a good tour of the website. I'm going to stop the share now, and I guess we could open up the workshops or the breakout room. Sorry. Again, I just want to thank. If we don't see you come back to the main group after. But if we don't see you, thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thank you. We really appreciate it.
Great. So do I go to a breakout room? How do I do this?
Yeah, how do we do it, Corey?
We just select the one we want.
If you touch on the one you want, it will pop up join and then join Creative Connections, and you.
Okay.
Right. Okay. Exactly. I forgot about that.
Thank you.
All right. Creating that connection that we, at the same time as you're challenging and addressing those issues of inequality, right? It's a strategic question. I guess I'll just end there, but super important point that I left in the middle of. So sorry.
And I was going to say something when you closed in our face. I want to say that also this cognitive dissonance will also like stem from we want to be right, or we want to be, liked, so there are, so even, like it's a threat to self-esteem, or it's a threat to our intelligence. So it goes into these deep, roots in terms of cognitive dissonance. It's not just like, oh, it's in my head versus it's in my feelings, right? It's not exactly like that. It's more about like, wait, I'm not a good person, or, like when it's in terms of feelings, such as I'm arriving late, but I believe in punctuality. And now I'm like, no, but it's very different. And then you start justifying, like, okay, so then I'm a bad person. Or is it about like, I want to be right? No, the world doesn't work this way. Like what? you know, like, and then your intelligence, a threat to that intelligence. So that's where sometimes we think it's different, but it's very close, you know. It's just that one of them is more in terms of rational conflicts versus, but it's still very emotional when you go deep in those roots with those. You don't have to go in deep in those. So this is not therapy, but we see that, you know, it's because they emotionally get attached to a view.
So Sue, Kim, how was your workshop? Oh.
We can't hear you, Sue.
Default mute. It was good. We had some clear evidence of people engaging with something that's, you know, initially weird as an exercise, sort of unfamiliar maybe. And it was wonderful. We could have talked about it for a bit more. So I was just sharing with Christine the link to the Resist Violence blog that Allison, Kim, and I did about using critique as a form of artistic activism and approaching creative work in a way that, you know, creates connection.
Yeah, it's a really great article. Deserves to be read. Kim, final last words?
Yes, don't look at anything that I wrote in the chat is my I think I messed up everyone's email. I'm so sorry.
I just wrote mine at the end, sorry, because mine has a little C in there.
I massacred yours like twice too. So my apologies. Please, you know, don't hesitate to be in contact with us if you can. And if you're interested in joining our community too, I mean, we love to share and exchange on things that worked. I mean, oftentimes what I say our community practice does is we kind of like have a can of worms and we're kind of like, oh crap, this happened. And we were trying to address this issue in the, you know, in the class or whatever. And what can we do better? Right. So there's a lot of that going on. Yeah. So thank you so much I feel like this was really enriching personally. I hope it was for you as well. Good. And I'm looking at what Ava's saying. I'm such a slow reader that I'm like, okay. Oh yeah.
Sorry, we're at the end. I just wanted to bring that in because I think that's. I remember as a young student when we talked about all these things and to hear, okay, so this is what the world is. Rape culture is normal. I think it's important also for young women to hear that it's not normal, and changes will come. There was a time when we were not allowed in university. Now we are. The world changes.
Yeah, I wish that Carolyn had not left already, because the question about has someone tried this in a physics or other STEM class is something that I had hoped we could address even just briefly. Somebody needs to be the first.
Carolyn is still here, just so you know.
Oh, okay, good. I mean, Pat or Kim, do you know of anybody trying some of these techniques in physics STEM classes?
No. Yeah. I mean, not yet, but we've had interest. I mean, there are some people who have come to us and said they'd like to be involved. They don't know how.
Right.
I think those are things that can be worked out.
It can be, you know, theorized and a praxis developed. Yeah. Try some things. Yeah.
I would hope so. And Etienne is also saying, so you teach physics as well, Etienne. Okay.
We talked about it a little bit in terms of cognitive dissonance, that in a sense, in any class, I mean, if you're really teaching, right, you're going to destabilize how students think. And therefore, this pedagogy, in one sense, in terms of what it's asking us to think about as we develop a course, it really is relevant anywhere, right? It's about assuming that your students are going to resist you, assuming that you're going to face resistance, denial, whatever, right? And finding ways to break through. And the ways that you break through can't simply be, these are the facts, right? It has to be somehow where you get at them through, different ways, that unexpected, right? And we talked about, so we did talk about that quite a bit. We talked about, and Carolyn was talking about bringing up some social issues in her physics classes. But we talked about I think we can also think about art in a bigger way, perhaps, and think about how do we bring creativity in the class, right? Yeah. Because it's about I think that's what's interesting is when students suddenly get their creativity somehow activated, that opens up a new response to them, you know? So
yeah, I would go so far as to say that artistic activism has a lot in common with creative problem solving, which I assume is something that is in a lot of science courses, right? Like you have to creatively figure out how to get certain things to work. And so, yeah. Kayla, sorry.
Hello. I just wanted to add, when I did an internship at Vanier College at one point, there was a organic chemistry teacher, and he basically loved art and he was able to combine it. So I can't remember his name right now, but he made every student create a project on a canvas or any type of structure where they would combine chemistry with art, and you would, at first you don't see the correlation, but the result is baffling. Like it's beautiful, and then he places it on a website. So if ever I do find it, I can't remember right now, I'm sorry, but it's just to say there's certain ways sometimes to go outside the box and add a little bit, even if it's not social justice or anything like that. It brings out another element out of the student, and also places an understanding of how they make sense out of chemistry, let's say, or they make sense out of art or something like that, you know, and then they're guided through that project. So you can help them out to understand and shape better their understanding of chemistry, and it modifies the art project along the way. So it's really, I find it magnificent. And then there's also Pierre-Luc Jolicoeur, who said something during our breakout room. We could be, I can't remember, but I really wanted to mark it down. So we could be not reckless, but no. Do you remember?
Yeah, carefree, but not careless.
Yeah.
Carefree, but not careless.
Yeah.
Thank you. I loved it.
And if we are careless, we have to admit it.
Yeah, right, exactly. To own up to it, right?
Own up to it, yeah. And actually, you know, thinking about art and creativity, I mean, I would obviously add storytelling in the mix. There's probably a place for storytelling in science classes, you know, the science just discovery and you know, personalizing it sometimes, right? I don't know, all kinds of interesting ways.
Yes, I had a biology teacher who added case studies, and it was really cool because the case study was really just a story about, they wanted to talk about paternity and DNA and how things are transferred or transmitted from one parent to another, to the child, and stuff like that. And so it really made you think, and you were shocked to learn that, oh my gosh, the student or the young person in the case study had actually one parent that wasn't really his parent, and he didn't know. And then so that brings, like, it's fun as well, and you make that logic, you make those connections in your mind as well. So there's different ways, yeah.
Thank you so much. So Corey wrote here, the next session starts in 3 minutes. Listen, I don't want to take away from anyone else's opportunity to go, but thank you so much for all the feedback here. I hope we can stay in touch. I feel like I just met people. It's this weird thing, right? We can't go out into the hallway and have a coffee. Yeah. I was like, oh, it would have been great.
Yeah.
Maybe we need to ask the organizers to create a table for the session in like GatherTown or something. Because
I think Zoom should create this thing called hallways, or like something, you know, like where you go out and like it's like a mini breakout room, but not a breakout room, so you don't feel isolated. You're kind of like anyone can see you and come in. How would that be possible? I have no idea.
I think GatherTown basically kind of does that the best that I've seen.
Okay, yeah. I didn't catch. So it's called GatherTown?
Yeah, it's where the breaks are. So I'll put the link into the
so
let's see.
Nice.
You don't need to create an account. You just click and you create an avatar, and you can interact in the space and walk up to people. And
Oh, there you
there's
go,
a beach, there's a games room, you can play piano, you can go to the equity, diversity, inclusion library, you can do a bunch of things.
That's the room for the conference.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you so much.
I think you guys taught us
Awesome.
way more than you know, that we taught you, because the STEM element was something really interesting, right? That really came up. So thank you so much, all of you, and stay in touch. Absolutely, you have you know, our emails are really easy, right? Romano at Dawson College, Simard, Alago at Dawson College.
Lago.
Lago.
Another
That goes to somebody else.
Yeah.
All right.
Awesome. All right. I think I'm going to go to GatherTown now. Okay.
Yeah.
Take care. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.